Okay, John again from Brookside Farm. So in the last video, we got into how to ballast, or at least how I put ballast in a tire. Okay. Now I want to talk about the why and the what. So ballasting, when you put that liquid in your tires, you do it for one or more of three reasons. Okay. You're looking to either lower your center of gravity. You might have a loader and you need weight to counterbalance whatever you're carrying up front, or you need it for traction. Now, so that's kind of the why. Some of the reasons why we put ballast in tires. When it comes to what ballast to use, it does get a little more complicated. Now, there's a lot of things to consider. You have to consider the environment you're working in. Is it cold? Is it a sensitive ecological area like a wetland? You have to consider cost, because some forms of ballast is pretty expensive and some are practically free. So those are factors. Safety. Some ballasts are toxic. So if you have livestock or pets, or even kids, you might want to choose carefully. So we'll get into all that, and that's what this video is going to be about. So, number one, it's going to be water, coming in at 8.3 pounds per gallon. So the advantages of water, it's pretty readily available, and it's certainly the cheapest option. There's no special considerations for the equipment in terms of seals or anything like that. It's non-toxic, so you can use it pretty much anywhere. And it's still pretty heavy. Now, the bad side of water is, of course, it freezes. So if you live in a climate where I do, I'm in Massachusetts, you're not going to be able to use water because it's going to freeze in the winter, and you really don't want frozen ballast in your tires. So, okay, number two, calcium chloride. Calcium chloride weighs about 11.3 pounds per gallon, so it's very heavy. It's pretty readily available, but it does have a few downsides, not the least of which, it is extremely corrosive. So if you have calcium chloride, you have to have tubes, or it's just going to eat your rims like no tomorrow. Now, calcium chloride also has an extremely low freeze point. Depending on how it's mixed, it can be as low as minus 58 Fahrenheit, which is pretty low. Number three, beet juice. It has a pretty good freezing point, definitely way below zero. It is very expensive in terms of pricing. It's very dense. It's up there with calcium chloride, about 11 pounds per gallon. So it's still pretty heavy. The problem with beet juice is it's really only available at dealers, certain dealers. And certainly the most common brand name would be Rimguard. Now, the plus side of beet juice is that it's completely non-toxic. So if you're working in a place that's environmentally sensitive, or you have a farm and you don't want the possibility of any of your livestock getting harmed if you get a tire that leaks, beet juice is certainly one of the better options because it's harmless. Okay, number four, windshield washer fluid. It's got a pretty good freeze point, typically minus 20, minus 25, depending on the brand. It's fairly common to get, not too horribly expensive, not incredibly toxic, although you certainly don't want to drink it, but it dissipates pretty quickly, and you can dilute it down and make it fairly safe pretty easily. And I would say that that's probably the most common one that I certainly install. It's just straight up windshield washer fluid. Now the downside of windshield washer fluid is it does weigh slightly less per gallon than water, so you're not going to get as much benefit from it. It's only about 7.6 pounds. Windshield washer fluid is readily available. Number 5 would be ethylene glycol antifreeze. That's your standard antifreeze that you put in your car. Weighs about 9.4 pounds per gallon. It's readily available, so there's that. It's heavier than water. Now, it does have a low freeze point of around minus 35. Now, the big downside to ethylene glycol is, of course, it is toxic. And not only is it toxic to animals, but it has, like I said, it has like a sweet flavor to it that actually attracts animals. So if you have a farm, if you have pets, and even if you have kids, in my opinion, I would avoid it. Because if you get a leak and kids are curious, even your children might get into it. And that is actually one that I will not install. I won't use it. I refuse for those reasons. It's also fairly expensive, so that's another good reason I wouldn't pick it. But to each their own, I guess. Now, number 6 would be something like RV antifreeze, used in recreational vehicles, campers, to keep the pipes from freezing. So that would be propylene glycol, which is not toxic. The downside of that is it is pretty expensive, but it does have a low freeze point. Propylene glycol is about 8.5 pounds per gallon, so it's certainly a little heavier than water. Now, at number 7, it's not a liquid ballast, but I'll throw it in here anyways, just for your reference. It's a product called Tire Fill, would be one trade name for it. And that's where you solid foam fill your tires with a very, very dense foam. That's probably your heaviest fill by volume. Now, the advantages of that is it also makes the tire flat free. You can run over nails, and I have several holes in one of my loader tires because, and it just doesn't matter. The downsides are it's expensive, it costs as much for the fill typically as it does for the tire. So if you buy a new tire that's $350, you'll pay about the same amount to have it filled with, say, like Carlisle tire fill. Personally, I absolutely love this stuff, and I use it. I get as much of them as I can when I can afford them. And the other downside, I would say, is they're a royal pain when it comes time to replace the tire, because it has to be cut in sections off the old wheel. And you may incur a lot of labor cost involved in doing that. So on a smaller wheel, it's usually just a throwaway item. But certainly on a larger tractor tire, it's more economical to do that labor. Now, there's several reasons you'd want to ballast your tires. Certainly in case of something like tire fill and the solid fill types is they give you the puncture resistance, and they add a lot of weight. but they make the tire flat free. And so that's a pretty attractive option if you have a tractor that you use in a lot of areas where there's broken glass, nails, or any kind of puncture hazard is a risk. Another consideration is center of gravity. If you work slopes, sometimes it pays off to have your tires ballasted so that you have a much lower center of gravity, or at least a little bit lower center of gravity. And it gives you some tip resistance. Another benefit of ballasting, increased traction. The more weight you have in that tire, pressing on the ground increases the friction, and with the right tread, it gives you that ability to pull more, or pull more uphill, or pull more weight. So there's that consideration. And certainly if you have a loader, you're going to want ballasted tires because it's weight that doesn't come off the tractor unless you're running around without tires. And that can prevent you from accidentally trying to pick up more than the machine should be capable of if the tires were ballasted. And by that I mean is if you have a loader assembly that's figured on having weights hanging off the back, and you need to take the weight off the back to do something else, and then you go and you grab your loader and you start picking stuff up and you start doing a nose wheelie. Well, you don't have to worry about that if your tires are ballasted because the weight's always in the machine where it should be. So that's basically the stuff I wanted to go over, just to kind of cap off my last video and give you some information about what's out there and what you would use and why and what to look out for. And it's the end of the day here. I'm just sitting back and kind of enjoying some Captain Black in my pipe, and thought I'd get this out. I'll probably edit this later, and that'll finish out that two-part series. And thanks for watching.